Welcome to the Football Club of Buffalo show. I am Ben Sujimoto here. Exciting news, Landon Donovan has scored his first goal back as an MLS player with the LA Galaxy. And it's it's really kind of weird seeing him on the field, and it was funny with the Sporting Kansas City making AARP jokes and so forth. I haven't been the world's biggest Landon Donovan supporter in the past, but he's a good personality for the game. He's done a lot, obviously, for the U.S. men's national team. Coming out of retirement, honestly, in sort of a desperate situation in L.A. It's I don't know. I think it's just good to have him back. We have Nick Mendola here also on the line to talk some, not necessarily about Landon Donovan, but he wrote a piece for NBC Pro Soccer Talk on a team that is right in the thick of that Western Conference race with the LA Galaxy, and he wrote on Matt Hedges and Walker Zimmerman. But Nick, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, anytime, Ben. Thanks for having me.
And I actually just read the Big in Texas piece, and that's how you can find it on. I would just Google search Big in Texas, Matt Hedges, Nick Mendola, NBC Sports, and you're bound to come up with it. But it's a nice feature-length piece on Hedges and Zimmerman, the two center backs at FC Dallas. And I'll kind of leave it at that and let you elaborate on it, Nick. What spurred you to write this FC Dallas defense-based piece?
Well, you know what? Walker Zimmerman, if you even more so than Matt Hedges, he just doesn't have the reputation yet, has jumped all over. Like, if you go to advanced statistics site and look up the MLS players, which, you know, from time to time you do, to see who might be either going over to Europe or really sticking out of the pack this year. And Matt Hedges' name has been coming up for years and years and years, despite the fact that his partners on the FC Dallas backline haven't been that impressive. And I've always been following Hedges because he was born and spent the first few years of his life in Rochester, which makes it interesting to me. And, you know, it wasn't too long ago, Ben, that as American national team fans, we were talking about John Brooks and worrying about whether he could be the future and saying, what are our options in terms of big, tough center backs? And there's Matt Hedges at age 26 at 6'4", one of the best players on FC Dallas every year. But this year, one name kept popping up in those advanced statistics pieces, and that's former U.S. Youth International Walker Zimmerman, who went 1 year after Hedges in the draft, but he's 3 years younger and took a little time to develop. Ben, this year Walker Zimmerman's overall performance score for a site like Squawka is up there with the biggest names in the league, and he plays center back. So you're talking about a team that is in the front seat, in the driver's seat for the Supporters' Shield. And, you know, Matt Hedges has been a top 5 defender in MLS for 5 years, and I think largely because he plays in Texas, we haven't noticed him. So I kind of wanted to get at what makes him tick and what's been so special with him and Zimmerman, if only because this January, how cool would it be? How many national teams in the world, national teams that people pay attention to, could you put a center back pairing out that also played for their country?
You're right about that, and I thought about it as you wrote the story, and you sort of thought how enticing that might be for especially U.S. men's national team manager not to have to foster a center back pairing, but one that already has that connection there. It'd be great, but I mean, I don't foresee it happening.
No. I mean, although Jeff Cameron, who's one of the state's best players, is certainly seeing his share of troubles right now at Stoke City. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of interest in him in the transfer market, and he did not leave. Stoke would not sell him, and we've now seen the players around him really struggle. And Cameron himself had an own goal. So, I mean, Cameron and John Brooks are your one and two guys, no doubt about it. But it's just interesting that the United States, with Miazga overseas, with Cameron Carter-Vickers potentially starting for Spurs in the League Cup this week at age 18 and still expected to elect the United States over England for his national team future, there is some depth at some positions that as American soccer supporters or watchers, we've been terrified of for a long time.
I'm glad in that piece that you did not make any Walker Texas Ranger jokes. I know it was
very difficult not to.
Probably tempting, yes.
Yeah.
And
sure.
Walker Zimmerman has been a boon for my fantasy team. So
I think for mine as well.
Mm-hmm. I also passed.
We never really got for the 4 people who would care about our MLS fantasy league. it is a three-way race, four-way race for the title. But you, myself, and American Outlaws president Jeff Faven are within like 10 points of each other with 4 weeks to go here.
It's just like that race for the Supporters Shield with, like you said, FC Dallas leading the way with 52 points, but then not far behind them, LA, and then Colorado, which has two games in hand, and then Toronto.
Yeah, don't sleep on them. Don't sleep. Tim Howard has been fantastic for them, which isn't a surprise. And they're doing it right now without Jermaine Jones, who's been nicked up and hasn't been able to play for a good period of time. They're a sneaky good team, Ben. They really have a lot of the ingredients for success, and in no small way overlook another guy who may make an impact on the international team, although more on the Swedish side, and that's 6'7" Axel Sjöberg, who I think is also on your fantasy team.
He was at the beginning of the year. I've since cut bait, but
oh boy,
nothing against him. I think he was hurt at one point. I just needed to change.
The locker room culture was just sick of seeing him hobble around on your fantasy team.
Back to the Hedges and Zimmerman thing.
Yeah.
I know you conducted interviews with both of these guys, and it's interesting for just a casual viewer of MLS or someone who's reading this to kind of get a sense of the personalities of the people who you talk to. And I'm sure you probably didn't include every single quote that you got in that interview with Hedges and Zimmerman. How would you kind of explain their personalities? I know sometimes athletes can be guarded or bland or different I guess mentalities in interviews, but how would you describe these two?
Well, I think Zimmerman came off as very positive and very eager. And at age 23, and again, we're asking him about the national team, et cetera. He's enjoying a season. I pulled the numbers up, while we were talking. And these are the players who have a better performance score than him in Squawka this year. Sebastian Giovinco, Ozzy Alonso, Giovanni Dos Santos, Ignacio Piatti, David Villa, Benny Feilhaber, and Chris Pontius. Those are all, with the exception of Alonso, attacking-minded players. So for a defender to be that high is remarkable. And I think he's a player who has to be enjoying, not that he's seeking it, but has to be enjoying the attention. At 23 years old, Ben, this is the guy who gets drafted, I think, 7th overall in 2013, had been regularly capped for the U.S. U20 team, and didn't, quite find his groove. So I think he's just enjoying playing well. Matt Hedges, on the other hand, has played well for a while. And I think what he's excited about is that sort of confidence that comes with being a captain of a team, and succeeding when you're playing as well as he is, or Sasha Kleston or Benny Feilhaber was, and the team is playing as well. You don't worry as much about the national team call-ups and the national team banter because you feel like you're backing your workup. And I found it interesting that he was very measured and very careful to say, yeah, I got that cap, and that was cool. And that's how he reacted to it. It wasn't, man, I've been dying for that second chance. So I think you've got a great balance there when a 26-year-old center back in Hedges can be the veteran leader, but also still be at the prime of his career with a young guy who's the same height, same American background, and harbors most of the same dreams.
When you look at the two of them and say Jeff Cameron just has a bleak next couple of years, but John Anthony Brooks is there and he's thriving. Matt Miazga just doesn't get a lot of first-team minutes, and it comes down to Hedges or Zimmerman to be that guy to step in alongside John Anthony Brooks. Which of the two do you think it is?
See, that's interesting. It does depend on which player is not available, because I think with Zimmerman you have this very aggressive ball winner type. Not that Hedges isn't an aggressive ball winner. When you're 6'3" and 6'4", you kind of have to be at least able to leap at those orbs as they come in. Mm-hmm. But I think with Zimmerman you're looking at that more of the John Anthony Brooks mold on defense. Hedges is more the John Anthony Brooks mold on offense. This is a guy who's going to win a lot of corners, a lot of set pieces. You don't want that noggin getting anywhere near the ball. So I really think if Cameron were to go out, Hedges is the guy you put in. Okay. A little calmer right now, obviously a little more, a little more experience, and he's a guy who some of the stats that don't make the cut because you wonder who the heck's going to care about it. But for this show, certainly our audience would. Hedges is a top 5 passer of the ball playing out of the back. in MLS as a defender over the last 5 years since he came into the league. And so I think, not that John Brooks doesn't want to ping those balls as well, he does. I think he would be more of a natural replacement for Cameron. That said, that's what Matt Miazga is working on right now on loan in the Eredivisie. Cameron Carter-Vickers is going to be playing, in theory, once he breaks in next to Jan Vertonghen or Toby Alderweireld. Excuse me.
There we go.
So yeah, it's going to be a fun time. It's a fun time to be a U.S. fan. They're loaded in attack. They're loaded in the back. And if Jones, Kleshton, Bedoya, Bradley can at least find a little bit of form, they'll be linking some pretty dangerous units.
And it's interesting because I think right now they're loaded in potential. I don't think they're loaded with current talent. It's like
but these are players, with the exception of Miazga and Carter-Vickers, obviously, but he's 18.
Yeah.
And Miazga's, I think, 20 or 21. These are players who are currently actually playing at their club, not the way in the past, Ben, that we've kind of circled Breck Shea and said, when he starts playing, these are guys who are actually playing. And when I mentioned the point about forwards, you're talking Bobby Wood, Josie Altidore, Pulisic, which is what we're going with, apparently, by the way, Pulisic. And Aaron Johansson, when he's healthy, Werder Bremen's going to put him out there. Terrence Boyd is getting back to that mix, too. So these are players who are playing now, not just, wouldn't it be nice if?
Mm-hmm. We don't know how the Miazgas and the Carter-Vickers will play in the U.S. national team fold, like in whatever the equivalent is into a cold night in Stoke kind of thing. Like in Mexico City, we don't know necessarily how those guys will hold up there. And I still think there's just a lot of questions, and some of it just comes down to Jurgen Klinsmann's preferences too. And I think that maybe is a worry more than it is something to be excited about. But then again, I guess that solely depends on your view of Jurgen Klinsmann.
It's a guy who a year and a half ago, Ben, was trying to shoehorn Jermaine Jones at center back just to keep him on the field because he didn't like his options there. Now, at the time, also, he didn't have an improving DeAndre Yedlin at right back, and it's because he wanted to play Jeff Cameron out there. So Yedlin helped with that a lot, but he was trying to find solutions. And I think he has, we could argue, but they're two guys who have to stay healthy.
Do you think it's harder now to break in the U.S. men's national team under Klinsmann than it was previously, maybe under Bob Bradley or even before that?
Yeah, I think that's for sure. It has to be. Darlington Nagbe is a fantastic player, and there are some people who are angry that he doesn't get minutes. But the way the team has played in the last window and the players ahead of him, I don't know how you're going to slide him out there because of the chemistry of the unit. I think about a guy like Jordan Morris, and I think you and I spoke about this last week. He could drop out of the pack altogether. That said, he's been fantastic. I think he'll continue to get call-ups. Julian Green, who is regularly on the subs bench week in and week out for Bayern right now, and Gideon Zelalem, who may start tomorrow for Arsenal in their EFL Cup game. He didn't go out on loan. Arsene Wenger kept him as an attacking talent. So it's the potential is going to come full force here, and it's interesting that, like England, right? So Harry Kane was injured this weekend, as I'm sure you saw, Ben, and I just read an article now. Does this open the door for Troy Deeney? There are, say what you will about that actual question. The United States is reaching a point where to get into the starting lineup, you're going to need an injury.
And I think that's good. I think eventually
it is very good. Yeah.
Eventually, the goal is to become like Spain or Argentina, a team that or countries that don't have a hard time, or they have a very difficult time picking 11 because they have a starting worthy 22 or 24 players, and that's obviously a good problem to have, and maybe a nightmare for Jurgen, who doesn't have the easiest time with side selection. But in some ways, like how can he go wrong if you're choosing from Nagbe and Pulisic and John Anthony Brooks or Walker Zimmerman, or you can keep going on down the line, and you forget about old standbys like maybe not Bradley, but Fabian Johnson and Gyasi Zardes and guys.
What happens to Zardes, right? Yeah, I think Johnson is still safe just because left backs are an endangered species. Right. Left backs of a high class. I mean, they've run out Edgar Castillo out there. They've, who else? Who did they switch over there? Matt Beasler. So I think, Johnson not so much, but Zardes, right? You hurt your ankle and you're out of your club. Is he getting called up, even if he's healthy, for the Mexico qualifiers?
Whew, that's a question that I don't know the answer to, but
right, of course, yeah. But
yeah.
It's fun to not know the answer to that,
yeah.
Because in the past it was like, it's the Megan Rapinoe on the Olympic team this year. You take her if she's going to be not that I agree with this, but they take her if she's going to be 75% because they're not sure who the other guy is.
I was going to make a point about the U.S. Men's national team center midfield, but I think that's a nice segue into our talk about Megan Rapinoe, because that has been really stealing storylines like crazy.
Oh boy, yeah.
Recently, and it's an interesting debate too, and it's one that you can kind of get into some gray areas and some dangerous territory. But I mean, at the root of it, Megan Rapinoe knelt again during the national anthem when the U.S. played Thailand, and it caused a bit of a spark. And I mean, there's been all sorts of drama. I mean, she did it with the Seattle Reign first, and that was when it really caused the initial uproar. And she did it in support of Colin Kaepernick and how he was being treated in the media. Then there's the whole fiasco in Washington where they played the national anthem when Rapinoe's Seattle Reign team was still in the locker room, and then there's whole lot of bluster about that, and then the cycle keeps on going. And
well, Ben, I think it's important to point out as well, right in this, that she kneels again for the Netherlands game yesterday against the United States.
Yeah.
And this is after the U.S. issues a statement saying, we really weren't cool when you did it the first time. So this is a pretty interesting thing to follow.
But they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything the first time. There was no punishment, I mean...
No, they didn't, but they said, they just issued a statement that was like, we didn't like that.
Yeah, but if you don't like that, you do something about it, you don't be like...
I think the same, they have the same issue that I do. I am 100% okay with anyone electing to use their freedom of speech. And when you're trying it, so I didn't have any issue with her doing it for her club.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very interesting when you're getting paid by your country and the flag's on your chest and you're one of the most visible things, and you're going into an international game. And you can make as many jokes as you want about women's soccer, but you're going into an international game where another culture is looking at you. Other countries are paying attention as well. And look, on one hand, it, in theory, inspires a player or inspires a country to look at why she is protesting. And I understand the point. Yeah, she should keep protesting because it's going to call attention to it. Mm-hmm. But on its base level, if we ignore what should be legal about it, it strikes me as something that is in poor taste.
We're on the phone here with Nick Mendola of NBC Sports Pro Soccer Talk, talking about the Megan Rapinoe of the U.S. women's national team, as well as the Seattle Reign of the NWSL, and just the complicated saga that's unfolding there. Nick, it's hard to, I guess, ask this question clearly, but do you think Rapinoe should continue kneeling, even though the U.S. soccer is clearly against it? Like, is it okay now if she just continues to kneel in the NWSL and then, continues to, or actually starts to stand for the U.S.? I mean, at what point does this stop losing its impact?
I don't know. It's a very good question, because I wonder at what point does it affect, it's always going to serve as a reminder. People will know why she is doing it, or people will ask that question.
Right.
And it's morphed into a couple things that I've read into more sensitive territory, and that she pointed out when she was supporting Kaepernick that it was something she felt keenly as a member of the LGBT community.
Right.
And that so this has become calling attention to another issue. And I guess I wonder where it reaches, because I was having a conversation with a fairly high-level media person, and for obviously sensitive political reasons, and for the fact that not everybody wants to put themselves out there on the topic. I can't really say who it is because it was a private conversation. But we were discussing what would happen, or is there any chance an American player does it in this next international break? Josie Altidore famously doesn't put his hand on his heart, but that's because of his beliefs as a Jehovah's Witness, and he's still very proud to represent the United States, and he's very clear about that. And I'm not sure that should necessarily be viewed as differently, but I can't imagine an American player doing it. And you look at guys like Fabian Johnson and John Anthony Brooks, who received some grief, or Klinsmann received some grief for having a German American represent America, but they take it very seriously. They go out of their way to learn the anthem because this country has given them a chance to play on the international stage. So I think it'll be fascinating. I can't imagine a player from any national team in the world on the men's side, and probably on the women's side as well, outside of Rapinoe, doing something like this. I think I think it's going to be fascinating to monitor, because even if Joey Barton is one of the more controversial players in the world, I can't even see a guy like him doing this. This is genuinely something that is, in theory, on a relative scale, a lot bigger than the NFL.
Yeah, and I don't want to stand on a moral pulpit and say like she's right or she's wrong, but there are a couple things that I feel about it, and I think that like it does take courage on her behalf to say I'm making this statement. I'm going to do what nobody has really done, and as long as I can remember. I can't think of another example of somebody kneeling during the national anthem other than the Kaepernick and Rapinoe thing. But at the same time, like she's also done other things to further the LGBTQ cause, and she's been very vocal about that. So it's not. I don't want people to think that this is the only thing that she's doing and that she's feeling slighted. But
it's consistent with her message.
It is
definitely, yeah.
and that's important to note. But at the same time, you have to wonder whether or not she's overstepping her bounds when she's doing it with the U.S. women's national team, and that's sort of what makes me feel uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable about it in the first place, and if the sake of it is to keep the conversation going, well, Megan, the conversation has been going. Like we're in an era of tolerance more than any other time in history.
Sure.
I guess how much more of the conversation does it need this radical of a push? I guess is what I'm asking, and it does in her mind. Does it in the collective mind? I don't know.
Again, she absolutely deserves to do what she wants, and that is her right as an American, and it's something I'm very, very proud of. I have that she has that right. That right makes me proud. I'm not proud of what she said. I think it takes representing a national team for me, and this is strictly coming from a sporting background. Her platform is so high. She is admired by so many people, myself included, that there has to be other ways to do it. And you could say the same thing for Kaepernick, which is what makes talking about this on loud and in public dicey territory, right? But I just think, like you said, I don't like it. I agree with it. I think she can do whatever she wants. She shouldn't be outlawed from doing it at all. Mm-hmm. Go for it. I just don't like that she is, and I think then that's my right?
And I wonder how much time or how much of this our views are colored by being soccer fans. Like, do you think the average sports fan even knows who Megan Rapinoe is and is really like digesting this and thinking like, man, like is my country really, giving me the freedoms that I deserve? Like, I don't know how far this goes deep into the to use the overused cliche, the American fabric.
Well, I think that's why it's important to note it on a relative scale, because the minute that this happens in a sport that we consider a bastion for the United States on a wider scale, and not even, I mean, you could argue that the United States women's national team is more famous than the United States men's national team, but I'll pick a random Caucasian player to play safe, right? Mm-hmm. And I won't even name him. If random Caucasian player on the United States were to kneel in that game, and the next game, by the way, if you're wondering if an American player has the gumption to do this, is in Cuba, and the first time the states have ever played there in a I can't remember what it is. It's not the first time they played Cuba, obviously, but I think it's in a friendly, like a hey, you have to go there to play this way. Mm-hmm. That would be a pretty gutsy thing to do. So, but if you do put that random player, and let's even get race out of it, if a random player did this for the United States men's team, it would be front page news across the globe. And Rapinoe was on the front page of the BBC webpage when that went down too. So we shouldn't say that, but you're right. There's a reason that she's being treated differently than Colin Kaepernick in terms of the news cycle. Mm-hmm. And I think that's mainly because Colin Kaepernick is in the NFL and she's in the soccer league. It has nothing to do with gender, very little to do with race. It has to do with the fact that she's under far less of a microscope to start with.
In my mind now, her legacy is very much tied to this social stance. It's not Megan Rapinoe, World Cup winner, Megan Rapinoe, outstanding outside midfielder, creator. It's Megan Rapinoe, the social activist, the controversial figure. And that's interesting to me because I think if you asked her if she's okay having that legacy, my guess, and I don't want to speak for her, but I'd say, she definitely would be okay with that. So it's interesting to think about. And I think
it's tied in. I don't know that it depends where it goes from here. Because she's 31 years old. Her time on the national team, especially a player with her who thrives on speed. You could compare her in some ways to Landon Donovan, right, as a style of player. 117 caps, right? She's got a World Cup. She's got, what else does she have? She would have the Olympic gold medal, yes. So, and again, this is someone who is, she's in a sports hall of fame for gay and lesbian people. So she, as an activist and as a skilled player, in both ways, she's been recognized. Mm-hmm. So I think if she spends the next 40 years of her life, and it has nothing to do with soccer, just pushing the activist buttons, then yes, you're right. I think she could supersede that. But like Muhammad Ali and others who have taken significant stances, I think it gets brought up every time her career is raised in the rearview mirror.
Nick, we're right up against the break here on the Football Club of Buffalo show. We will be right back in a couple minutes.
Are you a K-12 school teacher seeking permanent certification? Are you an instructor seeking new methods and tools to engage your students? Are you interested in learning about the latest technologies and media for teaching and learning? If you are, then consider the Educational Technology Master's Program at SUNY Buffalo State. You can learn about the latest methods and tools for teaching and learning, including classroom technologies, instructional and visual design, text and graphic design, video production, television production, web design, audio editing, animation, distance learning, research methods, and much more. Our master's program is 33 credits or 11 courses in length, and we offer classes during the evenings and on the weekends. For more information, call 878-4923 or visit us at www.buffalostate.edu. The future is yours at SUNY Buffalo State. Finding a job in the bartending industry can be rough. You need to be employed to get experience, and in order to get experience, you need to be employed. Here enters Bartenders Professional Training Institute, licensed by the New York State Education Department, training students since 1992. Located at 3815 Delaware Avenue in Kenmore is a 40-hour intensive hands-on training featuring an alcohol awareness certification, as well as learning about the different kinds of beer, wine, liquors, and everything in between. You leave this institute with confidence and security inside their job placement program, as well as knowledge about the industry and customer service skills. With a completely flexible schedule, you can finish the class in as little as 2 weeks. For more information, call 716-874-9112 or visit www.bartenderprotraining.com.
Hey, local businesses! Did you know that underwriting could get you noticed and recognized from people all throughout the Buffalo area for only a fraction of the cost of what you would pay for commercial radio airtime? 91.3 FM WBNY has been an integral part of the Buffalo community since 1982. Did you know that we're a non-for-profit student-run organization? For us to maintain our daily operations, WBNY counts on the student activity fee here at Buffalo State, as well as contributions from you, the local businesses. For more information, contact the WBNY underwriter at 716-878-3080 or WBNYUWD@gmail.com.
Dee Dee, you've got a letter from New York.
Why, it's from the John Murray Anderson Theater School.
I never did like the idea of you letting your 15-year-old daughter go all the way to that big, wicked city and to be an actress.
Shh. Betty, let me read. Dear Mrs., Lucy's wasting her time and ours. They say she has no talent.
I am sorry, Dee Dee, but at least she'll come back home to Jamestown.
Lucille Ball did return to Jamestown, but she wouldn't take no for an answer. A few months later, in 1927, she went back to New York and became a model. Then to Hollywood, where she became a film actress, TV star, and America's most beloved comedienne. Not bad for a small-town girl with no talent. It's part of our heritage in Buffalo, Western New York, and the Niagara Peninsula. From the NFHB and this station.
91.3 FM WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative. Brought to you by the Student Activity Fee here at Buffalo State College. This is All Talk Monday, WBNY's public affairs programming that airs Monday mornings till midnight. The views expressed in all the various All Talk Monday shows are not necessarily those of WBNY, the United Students Government at Buffalo State, or Buffalo State itself. Due to the opinionated nature of these programs, listener discretion is highly advised. If you have any questions or comments about All Talk Monday, you can direct them to WBNY's All Talk Monday, 1300 Elmwood Avenue, Buffalo, New York, 14222. For more information, check out our website at wbny.buffalostate.edu. Or you may give us a call at the station at 716-878-5104 and take part in all the various All Talk Monday shows.
Back now on the Football Club of Buffalo show. I am Ben Sujimoto from the Buffalo News soccer blog. That's soccer.buffalonews.com. Plenty of local college soccer content there right now. Just recently today we posted a story on Canisius women's soccer and another rebuilding program. And then tomorrow we're also going to have the St. Bonaventure men's soccer team with an early season look. So there's a lot of info there. You can sort of keep track of what's going on in the local college scene. And it's a kind of exciting year. It's still kind of hard to tell how it's taking shape. But before we get to more college talk, we've got Nick Mendola back on the line. Nick's from Pro Soccer Talk over at NBC Sports. And we just finished talking about Megan Rapinoe and her stance and her I guess, societal statement in kneeling during the national anthem, and also had a pretty good chat about the article that he wrote on Matt Hedges and Walker Zimmerman of FC Dallas. So you can go to NBC Sports Pro Soccer Talk and read that. Nick, I want to turn now to the English Premier League, as we're only, I think it's 3 weeks in now? 4 weeks in? 3 weeks in?
5 games, but I believe we may have had a midweek game at some point. We're a few weeks in, Ben.
A few weeks in. And really what's happened is leading up to that, the Manchester derby, Manchester United was flying, right? And then they lose to City, they lose in the Europa League, and then they lose to Watford again this weekend. How much are you pushing the panic button for Jose Mourinho's club?
I'm not. I push the panic button in terms of right now. It doesn't look like the way Man City looks with De Bruyne and company. It doesn't look like they'll ever lose. So that's the only way I'm pushing the panic button. Mm-hmm. Pogba's taken a little while to adjust. He hasn't been fantastic. He hasn't been poor, but again, when they pay what they paid for him, you need something better. And I honestly think him coming good is the main thing here. When he plays at 65, 75% of his level, everything's going to be fine for United. You just worry because you don't worry when they lose to Man City that much.
Right.
You don't really worry when they lose in Europa away in a one-goal game against Feyenoord. But you do worry when they lose 3-1 at Watford.
Right.
And that is why arresting this kid quickly. It'll be interesting to see who Mourinho trots out against Northampton on Wednesday, because it may be a statement of what he views for this weekend when they have the early game against Leicester.
And he started a really strange lineup against Watford. I mean, there were names in there that I was not expecting to see, and I realize that it's 3 matches in a week, and that's difficult on your numbers. But Memphis and Bertrand and guys like that, I was a little bit kind of surprised by.
It was. I thought it was interesting in a lot of different ways. And again, this is the point we made earlier in the season. Every year, there's going to be a team or two. In Watford, this isn't the case with Watford. I'm kind of stretching a little bit. But every year, there are going to be a team or two who are very good, who miss out on Europe. And those teams, Chelsea right now is an interesting one. Liverpool is another. Have to take advantage of the fact that in this early season, they have a less congested schedule than their competition. Everton is doing that right now. They also haven't played anybody, but Everton is doing that right now. Mm-hmm. Liverpool and Chelsea have to a certain extent, but we've seen Chelsea kind of blow it over the last 2 matches with the loss to Liverpool, which is no crying shame, and the draw against Swansea. You can't make those mistakes if you're a Man United, and you have to wonder if it would do them good to get bounced out of the Europa League, or if they should be using the Europa League as a, hey, win and we're in. But in any event, I think they're much better than their 9 points in 5 games show.
I've got to admit, I was a little thrown off in the EPL app that I'm looking at right now. Eric Bailly is actually listed as Eric Bertrand. So, yeah.
Well, it's his middle name. He's Eric Bertrand Bailly.
Yeah, no, I was very confused. But I have to ask, the Luke Shaw, Jose Mourinho thing, is this, and to a little background, basically Jose called out Luke Shaw for his performance, and it's not un-Jose-like to do that when it comes with players. He's very forthright, I think, in what he believes. But do you worry about that there's now a little bit of manager-player back and forth?
Look, I don't like it, and but you have to remember this is how you feel about a player doing this when they're losing. If it's, I don't know, if he calls out Rooney when Rooney's not playing well, people say, oh, he's not afraid to, or if another manager calls out one of their best players, it's not an issue. This is how Mourinho operates, and we're going to be extra critical of it because United is in a down spell. But he's done this before. He famously, remember I can't think of the striker. The striker for Chelsea, who then celebrated his goals, but was it Samuel Eto'o? Yeah, who celebrated his goals by fake limping to the corner flag because Mourinho had made a comment about him being older. This is kind of what he does. Shaw joins Blind and Bailly as players who have been ripped apart by Mourinho in the first few weeks. And that is alarming to some people because, we're not used to seeing this, and we're not used to seeing it at United. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's also more because this would have been fine 20 years ago, I think. I think it would have been fine 30 years ago. But we are in a player-first culture that seems to bristle whenever, they're not, and this is the case for Shaw, but on the whole, when they're not treated like unique and special snowflakes.
Moving over to Spurs, it's another situation of whether or not they should be feeling panic, and some of that is not so much results, but, losing in Champions League and then seeing Harry Kane's potentially serious injury. I don't know if there's been a certain timetable attached to that yet, but it's definitely an ankle injury and one that's going to cost him probably some time. And they signed Vincent Janssen for not necessarily the reason of Kane going down, but as that second striker that they can use in matches where maybe they need to give Kane a break. But I don't think the plan was ever to be like, oh, okay, Janssen's going to be our number one striker. And honestly, I don't think that's an area where they have a lot of depth. So how do you feel about the Kane injury and then what that portends for Tottenham?
Well, if I'm a Spurs fan, it's just exasperating because I know my team is very good. I know that they're going to be fine in the long run. but you've been waiting for the numbers when Harry Kane is on the field with Moussa Dembele, Moussa Dembele. There's so many Moussa Dembeles that it is. It's very. You've been waiting for this moment. Like, well, when he gets there, it's going to free up Eriksen.
Right.
It's going to free up Kane. Maybe Vincent Janssen comes good. There are other guys who can play in a, say it with me, false nine role. But it's just, I think when you're a Spurs fan and supporter, you're just kind of thinking, can we catch this break? Can we just get a little bit more of a break? And I don't blame them for that. Moving forward, is this a good time for Spurs to have as many injuries as they have, or have an influential injury, I should say? And that is kind of interesting, right? I mean, this is not a Champions League week. They're going to get by Gillingham with no problem. They have Middlesbrough at the weekend. So, maybe it's a decent time for other players to try and catch form and let Harry Kane kind of chill out for a bit. But if I'm not mistaken, Man City is next for them on a Champions League week. So they should hope it's not a long-term thing.
And if it is...
For every reason, because he's awesome. I mean, they should hope it's not a long-term thing because he's good at soccer also.
But if it is a long-term thing, I don't think they're well prepared, and it's a long way until January. So the false nine thing, I mean, you go with Janssen, but I mean, is Janssen going to be able to play 90 minutes regularly in a 3-game week? No.
Heung-min Son, who I think is going to be able to contribute for you there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. There is a player who's on the tip of my tongue that is absolutely the right answer for this as well. They may regret. I mean, Chadley was a guy they could use there, and he's looked great for West Brom. But there are other players who they can slide in there and hope they do a job. But you're right. This is a team built around depth in midfield, not depth at target forward.
All right, Nick, thank you very much for joining us on the Football Club of Buffalo show. It's good to talk to you about an assortment of topics. We even got a little bit into some territory that we don't usually get into, that Rapinoe conversation. So it was a good conversation, Nick. Thank you very much for joining us.
No problem. I look forward to having more.
That was Nick Mendola of Pro Soccer Talk of NPC Sports. He just recently penned an article on Matt Hedges and Walker Zimmerman of FC Dallas, so you'll want to go and check that one out. You can find it by going to NPC's and by visiting the NBC Sports Pro Soccer Talk website, or just by searching Matt Hedges and Nick Mendola together on Google, which I'm sure a lot of people do anyhow. But for the remaining 10 minutes, I want to just kind of get us caught up in what's happening in local college soccer. And that's really how I've been spending the majority of my non-Buffalo news time. I guess it still is Buffalo news time, but more of my non-in-the-office Buffalo news time has recently just been going to a lot of college soccer games, both men's and women's, and getting a lay of the land and looking at the Division I college programs around here by taking a step back. And it's interesting to see all the rebuilding processes that are going on and the different tactics and the patience that these teams have to have. Because, I mean, I can give you a laundry list of schools that are in that rebuilding. You have the Niagara men. You have the Niagara women now, who suffered a ton of injuries to some of their better players and now, are trying to find answers down there in their depth. You have Canisius men are not so much in a rebuilding mode as they are trying to get out of mediocrity. St. Bonaventure men, very much in a rebuilding mode. St. Bonaventure women also in a rebuilding mode as they're relying on a lot of young players, a freshman goalkeeper, a freshman striker, and they just graduated their 2 leading scorers this past year. And the UB still seems to be, and in some ways as they should be, just being the biggest local school as the front runner in both the men's and the women's programs. Is it going perfectly? No. But these are still... I mean, you can't say too much negative about the UB women because they've won the MAC East Division the last 2 years. The UB men going to the MAC final last year. And the results have spoken for themselves recently, but this year there's been all the talk about the UB men, and they were sort of a little bit of cold water was doused on them yesterday as they lost to South Florida 3-0, which is suffering their first loss of the year. In tough circumstances, tough climate. The game was actually called early for a thunderstorm I think around the 80th minute. But it definitely shined a light on some holes that I think Stu Riddle is going to have to think about. And you can probably stay tuned on soccer.buffalonews.com because I have about 1 million things to write. But maybe at some point it'll be about that. I'm not entirely sure, but UB men are going to be interesting to follow now that they're no longer undefeated. They're 7-1. They almost snuck into the top 25. They were actually the 26th team in the land before the loss on Sunday. But UB has St. Bonaventure coming up on Wednesday, and that's at UB Stadium. And I think it'll be a return to, I guess, the win column for UB there. But it's just, at the same time, you don't want to discount what St. Bonaventure is doing. St. Bonaventure is 1-5-1, so I'm not going to say, yes, St. Bonaventure has turned the corner from a team that finished with, I think, the 7th lowest RPI out of the 206 teams. Or maybe it was the 4th lowest. It was the 4th lowest RPI. So St. Bonaventure, which was one of the worst teams in Division I last year, now slightly more competitive. They played Canisius. They only lost 1-0. That, I believe, was on Saturday in a match that St. Bonaventure, controlled play for stretches, had the better chances for stretches in the second half in that game. At the same time, you can look at it like Canisius had so many chances in the first 10 minutes of that game. They scored in the 3rd minute. Canisius could have buried them, and the game could have been over within, the first, 20 minutes of that match. Didn't happen. St. Bonaventure stuck around. They battled hard. They seemed to be the team that had more fight going forward, and it's just without Kosi Nwafonso, who was St. Bonaventure's leading scorer last year, they just didn't have that extra, the person who could give the final ball, who could get behind the last person. Didn't have that answer up top, didn't quite have the composure in the final third. Canisius came away with a win, but head coach Dermot McGrain of the Griffs was not extremely happy that while they were able to kill off the game, they didn't really put it out of question at all. Went down to the final whistle where Canisius was threatened. So back to the St. Bonaventure UB game on Wednesday. I wouldn't write off St. Bonaventure. I wouldn't say this is going to be like last year where it was another chance for Russell Cicerone to score. I think he had at least a hat trick last year. I think he had 3 goals and 2 assists, or 2 goals and 3 assists, one or the other. But I think UB is going to win, but I don't think it's going to be by quite the route that it was last year. Maybe St. Bonaventure's run of form doesn't continue, and I think there's some worry that maybe they do hit that wall. But looking at Canisius, they won on Sunday over Central Connecticut State 2-1 in overtime, and there's a highlight that you should check out on Twitter. It's something that we retweeted, and it's something that I believe Griff Soccer tweeted out of Melvin Blair's first goal of the year. And that's when Melvin Blair scores goals, they're usually of the pretty fantastic variety. And while the Griffs tried to get that one on SportsCenter's top 10, they couldn't quite get that much of a push behind it. But I would definitely recommend checking out Melvin Blair's first goal of the campaign, because it was definitely a howitzer from pretty far outside. So Canisius heading into MAC play, MAAC play pretty soon. They're very much an enigma. I don't know if they'll be able to finish in playoff position, and it's a team that seems to be not yet peaking. I think missing Troy Brady on Sunday, and it seems like he might have an extended absence due to injury. There's some worry about how they're going to attack, and it's good to see Blair get off on the right foot. Matthew Santos is still scuffling a little bit. He's still very active. He's been creative to offset, his lack of scoring, but he's a guy, if he gets going as conference play starts, he could really change the whole trajectory of the team. He's that gifted, and if both he and Blair are clicking on all cylinders, then I think Canisius maybe becomes a team that could sneak into the MAC postseason, but I think that right now they're very much on the outside looking in. Over for the UB men, they're going to run into a gauntlet in conference play. I mean, having to play Western, having to play Bowling Green, having to play Akron, West Virginia. Finishing in the top 4 in the 6-team MAC is no easy task. And while they've done it, they did it last year in all the games against Western Michigan in the MAC semis, and then losing to Akron just 1-0 in the championship game. Every single game is going to be a dogfight, and it's no guarantee that they're going to finish in the top 4. But I think they're well positioned to do so. It's a veteran team. They have one of the best players in the country in Russell Cicerone. And, I mean, I guess that's one of my final messages to anyone who's still listening as soccer fans is to get out to Amherst and watch Russell Cicerone play before he graduates, because this is going to be a guy who, will probably be playing in the MLS next year. Just so talented. Has a big personality, too. He's not... you don't often put Russell Cicerone and humble in the same sentence. He will engage with visiting fans. He will very much rub it in people's faces when he has success. And I think sometimes that's just a factor of being a competitor and really he just has an absurd internal drive when he plays. And he hates to lose. He hates when things go wrong. He's hard on his teammates, but he's hard on his teammates just because he wants to win so badly. And I know that's a kind of a silly sports cliche, but when you see it happen, it makes sense. And just watching him play he's just phenomenal with the ball at his feet. He's a great finisher. So also stay tuned for an article, a feature article on him in the coming days over at soccer.buffalonews.com. So Russell Cicerone definitely in the spotlight as somebody who... Could he be a top 5 MLS pick? Maybe. It's not outside the realm of possibility. I think more likely he's a late first-round pick, early second-round pick. But I don't know. He's trained with MLS teams before. I guess it was 2 years ago now. But he's also in the offseason. We've had him on after the Michigan Bucks won the PDL title. So watch Russell Cicerone. Go to UB. Check out one of those games. Because he's a senior and he won't be around very much longer. So that about wraps it up here with the college soccer chat. Thank you very much to Nick Mendola for talking about several different topics. Again, you can read about Nick's feature article on NBC Sports Pro Soccer Talk, and you can follow all the local college soccer and other stuff on soccer.buffalonews.com. For Ben Sujimoto on the FC Buffalo Show, we will talk to you next Monday.